Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We're your two hurtling asteroids of hurtling factoroids. Whatever. There's no bad ideas in brainstorming.
C+.
I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh.
And Jordan, today we're talking about one of the biggest, dumbest, most ass-kickingest dudes rock movies of an action 90s peak. I'm
a bygone era.
I'm stunned into inarticulateness by this movie's the purity of its vision. That's right, we're talking about Armageddon, which turns 25 this June.
Wow.
The grim passage of time. It is the movie that taught us all that oil rig workers can, with the right montage, make successful astronauts, that there's no problem that Uncle Sam can't blow up real good, and that the leathery glam Muppets from Aerosmith still had hits in them.
It's like the Mr. Show sketch, blowing up the moon. Well, yeah. Wait, play golf on it? Bounce an egg on it? What else could you do with it?
I don't really remember this movie that much as a kid. Having said all that, I remember this in term that I remember that damn song more than the movie. But for me, my preferred Michael Bay, Jerry Bruckheimer joint is The Rock and then Con Air. I love Con Air so deeply. That's my preferred large plane movie. But you know, man, Armageddon is the highest non-Transformers grossing film in the Bay oeuvre. It is in the Criterion Collection, as we will discuss.
38% on Rotten Tomatoes, Criterion Collection. Even Michael Bay is baffled by that.
That might be the lowest rated movie in the Criterion Collection. I think it has to be.
Oh, that's an incredible dubious honor.
Yeah, but you know, as I quote the android from Alien so much on this podcast, I admire its purity. It's pre-oversaturation era Ben Affleck. It's Bruce Willis. It's got a ragtag group of character actors. It's got a training montage. It's got a sweet, bespoke vehicle jumping a canyon. What more do you want? It's one of the all-time dudes rock movies.
I gotta say, I've never heard that term "dudes rock" before, at least in relation to movies. Tell me more about that.
Oh well, it goes hand in hand with dad movies. It's typically like
dad movies are like Apollo 13, though. There's like a historical element.
Yeah, so
Tom
you take
Hanks
a dad
is usually
movie,
in it.
you take a dad movie, and you dial up the stupidity, and you have
more
a dudes
explosions,
rock movie.
less Tom Hanks. Okay.
Yeah, and occasionally I think it crosses into like combat sports. Like I would describe Karate Kid or Rocky or Bloodsport as a dudes rock movie.
Oh, Rocky's better than that.
Wait, no, it's not. I mean, because dudes rock is not it's value negative. It's just it's value neutral. It's like it can apply to anything. Like I would describe 47 Ronin, like Akira Kurosawa movies, as dudes rock movies. You know, like Good, Bad, and the Ugly is a dudes rock movie. It's just
now when
a movie
you say dudes rock, is that
Yeah.
like a celebration of dudes, as in dudes
Yes.
rock? Okay, I just want to make sure I have the inflection right.
of caricatured but not necessarily negative masculine values.
Okay. It's a very articulate answer to an inarticulate question.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
important that they're not misogynist. You know, I would not describe Transformers as a dudes rock movie because it's got leering, grotesque misogyny in it, and
In
also
Armageddon,
racist. Yeah,
Bruce Willis loves his daughter very much.
loves his
Almost shoots
daughter.
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. You know, there is a sweetness to their romance, even though it's very stupid
and involves animal crackers.
Yeah. So
I can't eat animal crackers to this day, actually, because of that.
because of this movie.
It just I always think of it. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, okay, sorry. Thus concludes my thesis on dudes rock movies.
Well, thank you. I mean, I asked you, so I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, when I was a little boy, I loved two things a tremendous amount: outer space and Liv Tyler. My beloved That Thing You Do cemented her in my heart as my dream girl for a time. So I was very much primed for Armageddon. This was the era when I was also graduating from PG to PG-13 movies. And as everyone knows, PG-13 movies hit different when you're actually in the 13-year-old range. So this was very special to me. Although I have to agree with you, Independence Day sort of got to me first, and we are a big Sean Connery household, so The Rock is probably my favorite Michael Bay movie. But
losers go home and whine about their best. Winners go home and the prom queen.
Of all our years of friendship, I've never heard you do a Sean Connery. That is pretty stunning.
Oh no, I did the Finding Forrester one. My name is William Forrester. I'm that one up there.
That's very good. Wow, and I've been watching a lot of Succession lately and listening to Brian Cox do his equally gravelly Scottish accent.
I'm never going to do Succession.
I know.
I used to work for the Murdochs. I'm not watching a thorough humanization of their inter-family squabbles.
I delayed a long time for a similar reason, but yeah, I'm thoroughly charmed by Michael Bay's skill for blowing stuff up in new and exciting ways. There's a great quote from a making-of featurette from Michael Bay on the set of Armageddon. This movie makes The Rock, his previous action thriller, look like my dinner with Andre.
He is a quote machine, man.
Honestly, an artier reference than I would have expected from Michael Bay, to be honest with you. But yeah, I know how much you hate I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. I actually have a soft spot for it, but I have a good reason. It was the final slow dance number at my high school dances. And, as every self-conscious guy knows, slow dances are the safe dances because all you have to do is hold on to your date for dear life and just sort of sway from side to side arrhythmically until it's over. The sound of those strings, man, I mean, to this day, it's so potent. It still makes my blood pressure spike because I always associate it with the sense of, okay, this is the last dance. This is your last chance to make your move that you've been avoiding all night. So I have good memories, ? Of that song. Memories, potent memories of that song, I'll say. I won't assign a value judgment. Like Dudes Rock, no value judgment. I gotta say, we were talking about Bruce Willis shooting at Ben Affleck in this movie. Way wrong answer became a minor catchphrase among my social circle at this age, which is probably preferable to Austin Powers references.
Yeah.
A little less annoying.
Well, from Michael Bay's visceral hatred of Ben Affleck's natural teeth to the allegation... I couldn't say that was
the fifth episode we've referenced Ben Affleck's teeth in relation to Armageddon. I'm glad we finally put this anecdote in its proper home.
To the allegation that the film was directly stolen out of a lunchroom conversation about the similarly asteroid-themed film Deep Impact to that damn Aerosmith song, here's everything you didn't know about Armageddon. There's really no way to talk about Armageddon without talking about Deep Impact. We had this whole thing in the mid-90s where we talked about, and it happens probably still, but it's how we talk about, we had Con Air, and then isn't there a Steven Seagal movie? It's Con Air, Air Force One, and a Steven Seagal movie on a plane, right? And then we had Dante's Peak and
Backdraft.
Is it just called Volcano? No, Backdraft's the firefighting one. There were two volcano ones around the same time.
Oh yeah, what was the other one? What we talk about when we talk about Armageddon.
Yes. So, but there is this thing of multiple projects get greenlit and two films that are suspiciously similar come out around the exact same time. And usually the bigger, dumber, sexier one wins, which is what happened with asteroid movies.
I mean, I've never seen and really have never given a second thought to Deep Impact. Do you know anything more? Have you seen it? Is it any good?
Nope.
Okay.
No idea. And I feel bad
with that, right?
I feel bad because I'm contributing to this whole epidemic, but no, I know nothing about it. Now we will, though. Yeah. According to a May 1998 issue of Starlog, producers David Brown and Richard Zanuck came up with the concept for Deep Impact sometime in the late 1970s when they were contemplating a way to update the 1951 film When Worlds Collide by Paramount.
That's such an incredible title for a movie where planets hit each other. That's amazing.
It's a Static X song. No, this is what it's like when worlds collide. Oh, no. You ready to go?
I just told you how much I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. You think I know that? You think I know a Static X song?
Well, that movie was itself based on the 1933 science fiction novel of the same name, concerning the coming destruction of Earth by a rogue star and humanity's efforts to build a space ark to transport a group of men and women to a planet orbiting the star. Screenplays were created and drafted, but the project landed in development hell for years and stuck there.
Do you remember this really short-lived show in the mid-90s called Earth 2?
No.
Oh, it was this really high budget really high concept show about similar to that. People try to build a space ark. I think it starts with the blast off of the space ark, and I can't remember if they're just going through space or if they actually land on a new world. I think they land in a new planet. And it was strange. It only lasted a season, but I think Steven Spielberg, or at least Amblin Entertainment, his production company, had something to do with it. It was really good, and that is relevant because.
Oh, I have a joke to make. That was
what's your
that was the producer's note for The Passion of the Christ. They were like, "Can we change it to the liftoff of the space ark?" I think it's just sexier that way. By the mid-90s, Steven Spielberg, fresh off Jurassic Park, was tapped, though by coincidence, to work on Deep Impact. Though he had been actually working on a different film about an asteroid colliding with Earth. This really gives rise to the universal, the collective unconscious thing, with just a bunch of different people being like, asteroids, man. His project was based on a book by sci-fi legend Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh, wow.
Who, most notable in the mainstream for 2001: A Space Odyssey, but often thought of as one of the big 3 or 4 of mid-century sci-fi with Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein.
Didn't he also do a sequel that was like 2010, A Space like Adventure, or a space
Hog. 2010, in the meantime, A Space Hog Adventure, written by Arthur C. Clarke. I said this had to be a non-digression one, and here we are. Spielberg had already optioned the rights for Clarke's novel, which was in 1993, called The Hammer of God, which is metal, and he had planned to produce and direct this film for his DreamWorks studio, which at this point was still kind of new. But then he decided to simply merge these projects with Zanuck and Brown. So you have 2 roads joining in a wood of asteroid movies. And this is Bruce Joel Rubin.
This is my favorite Dali painting.
Bruce Joel Rubin, who wrote Deep Impact, told Creative Screenwriting Magazine, Steven Spielberg called me and said he would like me to write a movie that was inspired by When Worlds Collide. Steven and I spent time at his office and his home talking about what we wanted, about who these characters should be. But we knew we couldn't make a movie about 2 planets on a collision course with the Earth and trying to save humanity by flying a 100-movie to the rogue planet to start a new world. Even in the 1950s, that felt kind of bogus. Sure. So we began to figure out a more realistic scenario. I began months of research into what might really cause an extinction-level event and was led to the comet that killed the dinosaurs. Why couldn't that happen to us, I thought.
It's not long. I felt like, I was really researching this, and I found this little-known incident from the past. It's like, the one that everyone knows.
Yeah. And so Deep Impact was born. Spielberg had still planned to direct this film himself, but then he got overworked with Amistad. Is it Amistad, like Rumspringa?
No, it's like Sean Connery saying it.
Amistad. I'm that one up there. Touchstone Pictures had also just announced Armageddon, set to be released in summer of '98. So, faced with this dilemma and not wanting to look like Johnny-come-lately to the whole asteroid craze, imagine if this was like the 50s and we got a bunch of novelty-themed asteroid songs, like Spice Girls doing like, do the asteroid. So the team behind Deep Impact decided to hire Mimi Later to direct the film, and Spielberg was going to executive produce. And then Rubin has this accusation that comes out in a book called Tales from the Script.
That's great.
Yeah, it is. 50 Hollywood screenwriters share their stories. And this is aggregated everywhere when people talk about Deep Impact versus Armageddon. So I actually paid for the Kindle copy of this book, and sure enough, it is in there. It is in there. It is a real quote. It's not made up. This guy wrote Jacob's Ladder. He wrote Ghost, Sleeping with the Enemy. He's like he's not a nobody. And his quote in that book is as thus: I was working on Deep Impact, and I had lunch with the president of Disney, someone who had produced another movie I had worked on. We're having lunch in the Disney commissary, and he starts asking me about Deep Impact. I just started freely and openly talking about it. I had no idea he was planning Armageddon. He was taking notes on everything I was saying.
That's a red flag.
Yeah. I wasn't really literally giving him my script, but I was talking to him enough about it that he could pick up the genre, the tone, the character-driven aspect of it. That was really clever, I thought. He was figuring out how to do a movie in juxtaposition to the movie that I was in the process of writing. Wrong. He was getting all of my ideas. It was really fascinating that there was a kind of subterfuge that was happening with this head of a major studio. When I found out that Disney was doing Armageddon, I went, wow, that's interesting.
Wow, the barely restrained passive aggression in this quote is tremendous.
I didn't know this, but Armageddon has what was rumored to be 9 credited screenwriters. That's what Ebert wrote in his contemporaneous review. But it doesn't have that many.
I imagine in the context of 9 screenwriters, this is what you got?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So the credited people on it, the WGA people on it, are Jonathan Hensley, who did work on Con Air in 1997, J.J. Abrams, enemy of the pod, J.J. Abrams, little nepo baby.
His daughter's opening for Taylor Swift. Do you know that J.J. Abrams also worked on Casper? I forget if it was like as a script doctor or if he was credited, but yeah, he has some kind of Spielberg connection. I think Spielberg's supposed to be his mentor, right?
I gotta find out exactly how he is. Yeah, his mom was a Peabody winning TV producer. His dad worked at CBS, and they moved out to LA after being in New York. His sister is a screenwriter. Yeah. Anyway, Tony Gilroy, who is one of the credited writers, told Rotten Tomatoes in 2007, there were so many people working on that Armageddon. I don't know what number writer I was. I worked on it for a couple months. I did exactly what I wanted to do. I got in, I did what I had to do, made some people happy, I got out. Shane Salerno is another credited writer. Yeah, right. I was in the Shane Salerno, another credited writer, is the guy who he wrote that he like self-funded and self-produced that Salinger documentary from a couple years back.
Oh wow!
And one of the guys who wrote Outbreak, Robert Roy Poole, is also credited with a story by. But that's just the tip of the Armageddon iceberg steroid.
Incredible visuals you're coming up with here for your analogies. Really, really admire that. But yes, you are correct. There was a New York Times Magazine feature in August 1998 that detailed the Armageddon script's reported 8 writer-strong development process. So let me read from that. After Jonathan Hensley conceived a story he described as Dirty Dozen Goes to Outer Space, sold the pitch to Disney, and delivered to producer Jerry Bruckheimer a script that mapped out the film's essential structure, he eventually left to work on another project, which was to be his directorial debut. And I'd also be remiss not to mention the involvement of all-time action producer Gale Ann Hurd, who produced a number of immortal action bangers like Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Tremors, and The Walking Dead. Big
also James Cameron's ex-wife.
Yes. Oh, I forgot about that. I knew they were co-workers.
Involved.
Yes, okay. At that point, in the spring of 1997, the film Armageddon was already set for production and slotted for a July 1998 release. The director and star were in place, additional casting had already begun, and then a parade of additional writers had at the script. Tony Gilroy did extensive work on the opening 15 pages, with contributions from Paul Atanzio, and Jeffrey Abrams, who I think is J.J. Abrams, then concentrated on the backstories of the individual driller spacemen, reflected in a montage summoning them to the NASA headquarters, and continued to do scene work throughout. Ann Bitterman focused on Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler's romance, as well as the father-daughter conflict between Liv Tyler and Bruce Willis. And Shane Salerno fleshed out several action sequences, while Scott Rosenberg contributed Steve Buscemi's sarcasm and Ben Affleck's horny animal crackers bit. I love that we know the name of the person who came up with the animal crackers walking along Liv Tyler's torso. That is tremendous. I'm so glad. I want to send him a fan letter or a box of dog shit, one or the other. Oh, and he also wrote the rendition of the crew singing John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane right before they left. That is, okay, so my favorite and least favorite bit of this movie came from the same mind. So that scans. Robert Towne, who is an incredibly legendary screenwriter, wrote Chinatown, Shampoo, The Last Detail.
This is the craziest one to me. They got the guy who wrote Chinatown to come and punch up the Big Rock Hit Earth movie.
From the same spirits that brought you Large Plane, Large Boat, Large Rock Hit Earth.
It's either Large Rock Hit Earth or U.S. Blow Up Large Rock. Those are the two working titles I'm pitching.
Yes, Robert Towne, also one of Hollywood's most famous script doctors. He wrote some of the more serious scenes in this movie, the ones that really underpin the world's imminent doom. And during production, Jonathan Hensleigh, the guy who basically conceived of the story, continued to function in kind of an editorial capacity, patching together various pages contributed by all the other writers. But this turned out to be too many writers. Again, 8 writers, some would say 9. In June 1998, a Writers Guild of America arbitration committee decided that only 5 of these, including J.J. Abrams, could actually attach their name to the movie in the credits.
That's insane. And that's how you know it really is getting nuts, when the WGA gets involved. Anyway, so yeah, draw your own conclusions about how that story evolved from all of that.
The blame is spread.
Yeah. There's also this hilarious, I mean, the DVD commentary for this has become like a totem for people online because of how hilarious it is between Michael Bay and Ben Affleck. So we're going to draw a lot from that. Just when we keep saying from the DVD commentary, it's well worth your time. And this hilarious quote about the rewrite process comes from Michael Bay himself. "This writer begged me to rewrite the script. He rewrote 53 pages in 2 days. And when I read the script, it was pure
I mean, that's like Kerouacian figures.
I was going to say, that quote reminds me of like a drill tweet. Like, this whole thing smacks of gender, I say, as I flip the picnic table over and turn the 4th of July into the 4th of Michael Bay as drill tweets.
He does not name the writer, I assume.
I pray it's JJ. It kind of has to be. Like, I don't think there's anyone who's that young that Michael Bay would be like, your script sucks, bro. And adding more fuel to the Armageddon versus Deep Impact fire. Apparently, this is from MoviePhone, and a source told MoviePhone in 2018 that Bay and this guy snuck into the Paramount studios while the Deep Impact was being edited and stole dailies from the editing bay to compare it to Armageddon. And then after Deep Impact came out first, Disney Studios chairman Joe Roth came and threw the Armageddon production an additional $3 million to punch up the visual effects. So all of which is to say, in the feud between the two movies, Armageddon knew what it was doing.
Yeah, but ethically, it took the lower road.
Yes, that's true. They where Deep Impact went high, Armageddon went low in so many ways.
Yes. There's a tremendous GQ oral history of Michael Bay's career that opens with the line, in 1998, a national magazine asked in an article, "Is Michael Bay the devil?" Friend of the pod, Ben Affleck, is quoted in this oral history as saying, quote, "I think Michael is actually an auteur in the true sense of the word. Every movie he makes reflects his personal creative vision. You may like it, you may not, but those movies are him without compromise." It's a very generous read.
Yeah.
Michael Bay himself said for the same oral history, "I took a geology course with this Teutonic expert at Wesleyan. He said..."
Wait, tectonic. Teutonic would be German.
Oh. "I took a geology course with this tectonic expert at Wesleyan."
Just Michael Bay at Wesleyan.
Yeah, that's confusing. He said, "Calamities happen. It's the plumbers who will fix the world." So Armageddon, that's what it is. It's everyday Joes saving the world. Now let's take a little look at Michael Benjamin Bay at a glance. Born in 1965, he got a start in the film industry interning with George Lucas when he was just 15 years old. And then he moved on to work at Propaganda Films, that's the name of a company. He wasn't making Triumph of the Will. Doing commercials.
That would come later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He would do commercials and music videos for stuff like Coca-Cola, an ad for the Red Cross, and the Got Milk campaign, which won a Clio. And he also did music videos for Meatloaf's "I'd Do Anything for Love," and also "I Touch Myself" by Divinals, and a Vanilla Ice song. Did you know that?
I didn't know about the Divinals. I knew about Meatloaf, because that's the most Michael Bay-ian vision
That's
of
true.
like a music video. But Divinals is hilarious.
Yes. But his music video work drew the eyes of producers Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, who selected him to direct his first feature-length film, Bad Boys, which grossed $141 million on a $19 million budget and began the Bruckheimer Bay Imperial phase of the 90s. They followed that up with The Rock, which, as we mentioned earlier, is the gloriously absurd Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage film where they have to break into Alcatraz to stop a terrorist general played by Ed Harris from launching chemical weapons at San Francisco. I forget why, but I'm sure he had an okay reason. Because he's Ed Harris.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very rare that he's like a bad guy.
Well, it's because if I remember correctly, it has some convoluted thing about like the treatment of veterans after serving. Like he and his like crew were like black ops guys or something, and they were like disavowed by the government. And so Ed Harris is going to poison all of San Francisco to prove a point.
Bad point, good movie. And then came Armageddon. One of Michael Bay's opening lines in the DVD commentary, that I think his actual opening line in the DVD commentary is, "Why is Armageddon in the Criterion Collection?" I think that's the first thing he says. But one of the things he says after that is, "Making films is like a war," which, props not coincidentally, James Cameron has an identical quote. And there's certainly an interesting dynamic at play with the cast Michael Bay assembled for the film. For starters, Bruce Willis was essentially forced into making this movie as part of a deal with then Disney chairman Joe Roth, all as part of a bit of industry drama that went back to a movie called Broadway Brawler.
Did you know about any of this?
I knew about none of this, no.
It's so crazy.
Broadway Brawler, it was a $28 million rom-com billed as similar to Jerry Maguire, but against the backdrop of hockey. Bruce Willis was to play the title character, Broadway Brawler, who is a washed-up hockey player. And in February 1997, Bruce Willis, who was also producing this movie, shut down the production in Delaware, firing the director, Lee Grant, who had won an Oscar for acting in Shampoo. Her producer husband, Joe Fury, who reportedly is the guy who brought Bruce Willis aboard in the first place, fired cinematographer William Fraker and wardrobe engineer Carol Oates 20 days into production. Basically fired the entire production team. Willis then called his old moonlighting director, Dennis Dugan, to take over as director. An LA Times article from June 1997 contained all of that juicy gossip, which Bruce Willis denied through his publicist. William Fraker, the cinematographer, later said, "Director Lee Grant was doing a great job, but Bruce was telling other actors how to act. It was a great script, and Lee's vision was a love story about two people with the background of hockey, but Bruce just took over." Several other sources confirmed to the LA Times that, Bruce was basically being a diva and demanding more screen time.
Yeah, talking about Bruce is complicated because of the whole recent news that he is retiring because of aphasia, but there is an incredible amount of ink spilled, not least of which from Kevin Smith, very famously, about his some of his habits on film sets that do not make him seem like the biggest team player when he was at the height of his fame. Anyway, the end result of all this drama is that there was the company Synergy that was bankrolling this film, canned the whole thing with the help of Joe Roth, who was then chairman of Disney, which owned Synergy. But at this point, production had already cost Synergy $17 million, which didn't even include Willis's fee, which is around $7.5 million plus perks. So the solution that they decided was Disney was going to pay off the $17 million that Synergy had already spent, and then they asked with a heavy implication. They asked Bruce Willis to star in 3 Disney movies for a heavily discounted rate instead of potentially opening him up for a lawsuit for breach of contract. And he wisely took this option, and it ended up working out great for him because the films that he made were Armageddon and then The Sixth Sense and then The Kid, which I didn't know anything about, but was apparently a big hit for Disney. But yeah, 2 of the highest grossing movies of the era were made as a result of him being a tremendous jerk on a movie that never got made. Those 3 movies grossed $1.3 billion worldwide. And poor Lee Grant went to TV directing and made for TV movies and back to acting, and she has never gotten to make this project. She gave a heartbreaking quote to Variety in 1997 talking about it. She said, "This was our project. We worked on this 2 years and got Bruce interested. I've had joy every day making this movie. It was so strange. One day you're doing great, and the next minute, when some kind of whim can destroy it, it was like a tornado. But on the other hand, that's life, and you go on and do other stuff. I tried to do my best shot, and I lost. If you lose, you lose." Hoofa!
And she was also blacklisted for 12 years in the 50s as part of the Red Scare.
Yeah, so that's super, super depressing. Really kind of tainted a lot of this for me. Anyway, so Willis, this is the first movie he's making as a result of this deal. And perhaps as a result of that, he did not come onto set super willing to play ball. He came in about 30 days into the shoot. And also Michael Bay was supposedly eyeing Sean Connery as more to star, but then he talked to some actual oil guys, and I think it was decided that Connery was a little too old to convincingly play the part. And then Disney naturally came in and was like, no, we got Bruce Willis for you. And then this got even messier somehow. This is a hilariously dated sentiment. While doing a Q&A on the Ain't It Cool News forum in 2007 promoting Die Hard 4, Willis said of Armageddon, "A screaming director does not make for a pleasant set experience." Adding of Bay, "Few people will work with him now, and I know I will never work with him again." In 2022, at a screening of his most recent film, Ambulance, Michael Bay said of Willis, "Bruce came in a month after we were shooting, and he was tough. What I realized psychology-wise, with actors, it's always psychology. He wanted to feel like top dog, because everyone was there for a month, everyone was sort of friends. Then Bruce comes in, and he wanted to kind of assert himself." The same year, he said in an Entertainment Weekly interview, "Bruce was tough at the beginning of Armageddon, and there was a point when producer Jerry Bruckheimer said to me, 'You've got to show him some scenes.' So I did. And Bruce goes, 'Wow, you should have shown me that earlier.' And ever since then, we got along."
Wow, you don't suck.
Yeah, right.
God, I don't think I realized that Bruce Willis was that prickly,
Difficult?
shall we say. Yeah, I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
Kevin Smith has a whole thing on working on the cop something, some movie with him where he just like shut down production and like went back to his trailer to like grill chicken. He's yeah.
I mean, it makes me think of Bruce Willis's, I say misbegotten, but I guess he did quite well, musical career. Bruno, his musical alter ego, Bruno, in the late 80s. And there's this incredible music video where he's like being backed by the Temptations.
Mhm.
And I just remember, I forget what the song is, but like,
Respect.
oh, is it Respect? And just like all the Temptations are like backing him and doing the Temptations moves, but they're all like, you can kind of tell they're rolling their eyes in the music video. Like, I'm surprised that they didn't reshoot that because it's very obvious how much they just are not feeling back in Bruce Willis.
Well, you know, those moonlighting checks paid for a lot of stuff.
Yes.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
Well, on the upside, Bruce Willis brought a lot to the movie, including this line that he improvised, which is, I think, kind of, you know, it's the trailer line. "The United States government just asked us to save the world. Anybody want to say no?" Come on, that rules. That's a good line.
It's good stuff.
I know. Also, I didn't realize this. Speaking of improv, all of the actors made their own choices for what their characters wanted from the government when they were negotiating with them about going up to actually do this basically suicide mission. One guy wants his 56 parking tickets in 7 states wiped off his record. Another guy has 2 what he refers to as women friends that he'd like to see made American citizens. No questions asked. My favorite, Bruce Willis says, "Yeah, Max would like you to bring back 8-track tapes. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but..." Someone else wants a full week Emperor's package at Caesar's Palace. And Harry Stamper, which is Bruce Willis's character, makes what definitely would have been my request. Who killed JFK?
Who killed JFK? And none of the guys want to pay taxes again.
Yeah.
Ever. That would be me.
Doesn't Nicolas Cage make a similar joke at the end of The Rock when he's going through some kind of like microfilm and he's like, "Honey, do you want to know who killed JFK?"
I mean, probably.
Maybe
yeah.
it must be like one of Michael Bay's private obsessions,
Fixations.
which is a kinship I feel with him. Oh yeah, Michael Clark Duncan's character wants to stay in the Lincoln bedroom at the White House for a summer. So yeah, good stuff. What would you ask for if the government was going to send you on a suicide mission that you more than likely wouldn't come back from, but they would offer you anything? Aside from no taxes.
Walt Disney's Frozen Head.
I'd put it in some kind of plastic thing and make it into a bowling ball.
Yeah, that'd be a good use for it. Yeah, I just want to kick it around. play a game of kickball with it.
I also love, speaking of just Bruce Willis behaving badly, at one point during the production, then Disney chairman Michael Eisner, I guess, made a surprise appearance on the space shuttle set to jokingly tell Bruce Willis that he'd been fired and replaced with Kevin Costner, which I love.
Yeah, that's great. Having Willis's character die, spoiler alert, I guess, was considered something of a risk because he was the biggest star that the movie had. But apparently, while he was still in negotiations, that was something he told Bruckheimer he would only do the movie if his character would die. And for the scene in which he says goodbye to Liv Tyler over the monitors, he was looking at pictures of his own daughters to muster up the emotions for the scene. So that's nice.
Do you think he insisted on dying because he was like, oh, I didn't want to do this movie in the first place. I'll be damned if there's a sequel.
Yeah, maybe.
You know?
Maybe.
Yeah. When the Thunderbirds fly over the flight, like Blue Angels type group of formation flyers in the final scenes during Harry's funeral, they're flying in what's known as the missing man formation, and it's basically the aerial equivalent of the riderless horse for state funerals, the processions that you see in DC, like with Kennedy and Martin Luther King and RFK and so forth. The formation is flown with 4 jets, and then one of the jets pulls straight up while the rest of the formation flies in their original positions. And to have this done at your funeral is an extraordinary honor. And the Thunderbirds later flew this maneuver in air shows out of respect for U.S. military personnel lost in the Iraq War and that war in Afghanistan. My stepbrother is in the Air Force, so I feel like I gotta shout out the airmen.
Another guy who Michael Bay was not super chill to, Ben Affleck. Making his move up from the relatively smaller world of Dazed and Confused and Chasing Amy, and yes, Good Will Hunting, to his first big boy pants action blockbuster. Funnily enough, Skeet Ulrich said in 2019 at a Comic-Con that he turned down Armageddon for As Good as It Gets.
That's insane. The part in As Good as It Gets is like, it's not even like a supporting role. It's this tiny role. He's probably got like 10 minutes of screen time. I call BS on that.
Affleck told GQ, I imagined Michael would be emblematic of everything big and Hollywood. I had come off Chasing Amy and Good Will Hunting, so I really had no idea what big Hollywood movies were like. He was right.
Yeah.
The producer and former VP of Bay Films, Jennifer Klein, told the magazine, Ben Affleck was new on the scene. We put him through the Bruckheimer Bay machine. Like, you're no longer chasing Amy. You're going to have to go to the gym, get a tan, get a haircut. And Affleck told Entertainment Weekly in 2022 that Bay had, quote, a vision of a glistening male torso in the oil. And he was like, that's going to go in the trailer and sell tickets. And he was right. We've talked about this enough. Let's get to the real meat of this episode. Ben Affleck's tiny baby teeth. The most famous bit of behind-the-scenes trivia around Armageddon centers around Michael Bay's hatred of Ben Affleck's teeth. Pretty early on in the DVD commentary, Bay just goes, yeah, we paid $20,000 for pearly white teeth, he says. I always liked low shots that kind of come up right under your chin and make you a little bit heroic. And Ben had kind of had these baby teeth. So I told Jerry Bruckheimer, God, he's got these baby teeth, Jerry. I don't know what to do. Which sounds like a Seinfeld line. He continued, Jerry used a very famous star in a plane movie that he replaced teeth with. So he said, we did it to him. Why not do it to Ben? So my dentist had Ben sitting in a dentist chair for a week, 8 hours a day.
Jesus. I didn't know that was what it took.
Dude, porcelain veneers, man. Now, the fine folks at The Ringer, on their feature on just this commentary track, did a little creative extrapolation and concluded that before 1998, Jerry Bruckheimer had produced 2 films that Bay could be referring to as plane movies, Top Gun and Con Air. In those films, the very famous star Bay could have been referring to are Tom Cruise and Nicolas Cage, respectively. They then compare a pic of Cruise in The Outsiders and Cruise in Top Gun to conclude that, yes, Michael Bay was following in Jerry Bruckheimer's footsteps in forcing one of his leading men to undergo cosmetic dental surgery for a film. It's actually kind of shocking. You look at Cruise's Outsiders teeth and Cruise's Top Gun teeth. Whew, Night
for
and day.
outside, or was it Outsiders? I think it was Outsiders where he had a tooth capped, and I think he took the cap off for that role. There's the picture that's always online that you see, like the before and after of him, and he's got like a real snaggle tooth. I think that was the deal. Like he'd had something capped. Didn't Nicolas Cage do something crazy to his teeth for a role, like a vampire movie?
Possibly. I mean, he's done 2 at this point. He did Vampire's Kiss, and Renfield just came out this week or this month. Renfield. I get confused pronouncing Renfield and Seinfeld, so I've been calling it Seinfeld and Renfeld.
Oh, he shaved his teeth, to transform into Dracula for Reinfeld,
What a weirdo. The teeth thing is something that haunted Affleck. Kate Beckinsale recalled on the set of Pearl Harbor, she mentioned to him that Michael Bay had crudely told her that she needed to lose weight, and Affleck commiserated by telling her the teeth story. And Kate Beckinsale told Women's Health, I was like, well, at least I get to hang on to my actual teeth. And then, adding insult to injury, on the commentary track, Bay said that while shooting, Steve Buscemi told him that he was going to get some work done on his teeth. And Bay responded, you have $1 million smile, and you shouldn't change a thing.
Come on.
But Affleck, those teeth. Them chompers.
That wasn't all we hated about Ben Affleck. There's a great story from the pre-production of Armageddon. We touched on this in our recent Good Will Hunting episode. After Ben left the first meeting with Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer, Michael Bay turned to Jerry Bruckheimer and said, Jerry, he's a geek. Like, which again, sounds like a Seinfeld thing. Michael Bay remembered thinking, okay, he's this kind of pale Boston guy. We can work him out, give him a tan, do everything to make him a star. But this wasn't enough to fool his co-star / movie love interest, Liv Tyler, who described him as, quote, this nerdy smart guy. He's obsessed with the New York Times crossword puzzle. He reads a lot. He's really interested in knowing more about the world. So all this to say, everyone on the set of Armageddon thought that Ben Affleck was a nerd. A pasty nerd with baby teeth.
From Boston.
Poor guy.
Affleck's DVD track is a joy. He has so much, I wouldn't even call it thinly veiled, contempt for this movie. He treats his commentary track like an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. He occasionally just makes fun of things that happen on screen. Every time Billy Bob Thornton is on screen, Ben starts doing a Sling Blade accent.
What's that?
Like he literally starts going like wandering around NASA, and he's like, "Gonna get me some of them French fried potatoes." For the scene in which the oil rig drillers are like sliding around in the oil, Ben Affleck starts making like cartoon noises, like whoop, zip, 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 and then you hear Bruce Willis go, "Yeah, one of the guys almost died shooting this." Because they filmed, Bay, and Willis all filmed theirs separately, and then they cut them together, so they weren't in the same room doing it. And then
arguably his greatest performance.
And then Affleck tells this perfect anecdote about the film. I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the f*** up. So that was the end of that talk. And also per Affleck, the entire love story dimension to the script was added during the whole rewrite development process because of Your Beloved Large Boat movie.
Yes.
Titanic had just been a huge hit, and so the Armageddon team figured they needed a romance plotline to kind of surf off that Rose Jack energy sweeping the nation. Originally, the film was supposed to focus more on the relationship between Willis and Billy Bob Thornton's characters, and Willis makes a maybe joke on the commentary that Bay continually reminded Affleck of this fact, that his part could be cut out completely if they needed to do so. Speaking of that, of the love scene that they had earlier that we were talking about, Affleck and Liv Tyler were friends before filming? Maybe from Boston because of the Aerosmith thing? I don't know.
I don't know, maybe.
So their love scenes were extra awkward. Tyler told cinema.com, it was really a nice treat to have Ben play that part because I did know him before this movie. He did treat me like a little sister. He was like, cover yourself up, girl. It was really fun. He's my friend. It was nice because we'd know each other's families and boyfriends and girlfriends, which made it all cool. The bad part is we were supposed to do these kissing scenes and we would just start giggling like crazy. Tyler turned down the role multiple times before accepting. Our second Scream reference of the day is that Neve Campbell revealed in 2018 on Watch What Happens Live that she passed on Liv Tyler's role, which means in an alternate universe, there is a world in which one of the killers from Scream plays the love interest of one of his attempted victims in the movie Armageddon.
Wait, who's the killer from Scream?
Skeet Ulrich. Spoilers.
Oh, right. Yes, yeah. Also considered for the part of Grace Stamper or Robin Wright, Denise Richards, and Mila Jovovich. Those are all fine.
Robin Wright would be good. Denise Richards is a blank slate, so maybe not.
Was she in a Bond movie?
Yeah. Christmas Jones.
Right.
The nuclear scientist. Christmas only comes once a year.
That's just cruel. Oh,
yeah,
that's also cruel.
It was terrible. That's like one of the worst Bond movies. Mila Jovovich would have been good. She would have been coming off Fifth Element.
Yeah.
The film was supposed to end on the tarmac once the survivors get back, but Affleck and Bay decided that they needed to end with the characters' weddings, and it was Ben Affleck's idea to shoot a bunch of wedding footage with like a Super 8 camera and have it play over the end credits, and that was his Super 8 camera that they used, which is just adorable.
He must be a Wonder Years fan, too.
Yeah.
I see the hidden depth of Ben Affleck, the profound sadness of Ben Affleck, the melancholy of Ben Affleck. That's really interesting to me.
We love Ben at TMI.
We do. I also love the bit where he starts singing "Leaving on a Jet Plane" to Liv Tyler's character before he boards the spaceship, and then the rest of the crew joins in, which apparently was a big risk. Michael Bay shot the scene 2 ways, with the song and without the song, because they weren't sure how it would play on camera. Bruce Willis said he was sure it was going to get cut because apparently no one could sing on the set, and they were all singing it in different keys. But it's like so bad that it almost works. It almost sounds like they're doing some kind of like complex harmony.
It kind of has to be like a rip of the Righteous Brothers thing from Top Gun, right? Like, there's no way that's just a coincidence.
That's true. But yeah, Bruce Willis said in the DVD commentary, it took quite a bit of work to fix that scene with everyone singing. Amusingly, in Con Air, Steve Buscemi referred to the irony about, quote, a bunch of idiots singing a song made popular by a band that died in a plane crash.
Define irony.
He's referring to them singing Sweet Home Alabama, which was recorded by Leonard Skinner. He is seen in Armageddon singing Leaving on a Jet Plane, which was sung by John Denver, who also died in a plane crash. Probably during the production of the movie. I think it was in 1997.
They make so many jokes or not jokes, but references in Con Air to Steve Buscemi's being like a cannibal and like a serial murderer. And then he's just like becomes the most likable person in that movie. Such is the power of Steve.
I think in Armageddon too, speaking of like meta movie moments, they make a Pulp Fiction reference, which is funny because Bruce Willis and Buscemi, right? We're both in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Unified theory of Buscemi. But back to the impossibly deep sadness of Ben Affleck. He ran into some problems the very first night of shooting when they were in South Dakota's Badlands, which was standing in for the asteroid. Michael Bay told Collider at a Q&A, they're walking out of a plane crash, and wind machines are giving 100-mile-an-hour winds. And all of a sudden, I see Ben Affleck trying to hit his face shield. They had real NASA locks on their helmets. I'm like, cut. What's going on? Ben, what are you doing? So he had to run literally like a football field towards him. And he was trying to find a rock to bust his mask because he couldn't breathe because the air thing was shut off. So they tried to suffocate Ben Affleck the first day on the set.
Just him smashing his own faceplate with a rock. Like, I can't breathe.
Or he just wanted to feel something.
Yeah. Incredible.
Hilariously, Ben Affleck told Entertainment Weekly, it's funny because Armageddon is the one movie of mine that my kids have watched and they'll kind of admit to liking, even though they relentlessly mock it and me. What are you, driving a tank on the moon? But they had fun, you know what I mean? They won't even watch The Town. So there you have it. Can't even get respect from his own kids. It's
so funny to me he picks out The Town as one of his movies that he's most proud of. The Jeremy Renner bank robbing movie. It does have one of my favorite line readings of all time in all cinema in that movie, which is where Jeremy Renner's making his last stand and they're like, you were cornered. The police are like, come out with your hands up. And he just goes, F you. Perfect Boston honk. Anyway. As with any ensemble cast, there are some fun bits in here about the rest of the folks. The leg brace that Billy Bob Thornton's character wears was his own idea for some reason. His manager got him the role. Thornton explained in an interview to People TV that his manager just happened to be in a plane ride with Jerry Bruckheimer and told him he should cast, quote, some really good, like, actors. I'm just imagining him leaning over and squeezing his shoulder, like, really tightly. Thornton later told IndieWire that while I don't really do blockbusters, I thought on the level that Armageddon was supposed to work, I always thought it did, and I enjoyed my time on that movie. And he's not immune to the film's charms. He added, every time when Bruce Willis is buying the farm on the rock, I tear up. Relatable. Owen Wilson. The first day Owen Wilson came to the set an hour and a half late, Bay told GQ. We put PAs out on the Warner Brothers lot. I said, call me when you find him. I put my arm around Owen, who's a great guy. I said, Owen, you know what? I worked with Sean Connery, and I gotta tell you, he was never late. And Owen was never late again. Per the commentary track, it was Steve Buscemi's idea to make his character, Rockhound, a genius who knew there was no way the mission would be a success. Buscemi played the part as a person who knew he was on a suicide mission, who knew the entire race was about to become extinct, and who, quote, wasn't going to get his panties in a bunch about it. Much of his dialogue was apparently deemed too funny and cut, sadly. And his character's line, you know, we're sitting on 4 million pounds of fuel, one nuclear weapon, and a thing that has 270,000 moving parts built by the lowest bidder, was a variation on something said by astronaut Alan Shepard, according to the Oxford Reference Dictionary in 1961. His quote was, it's a very sobering feeling to be up in space and realize that one safety factor was determined by the lowest bidder on a government contract.
Yeah, he's the first American in space, so he had a lot to sweat. I feel bad for Steve Buscemi in Armageddon. He reportedly was getting really tired of playing sleazy characters and was hoping that this role would break him out of that because as written, the character was kind of heroic. But as soon as they cast him, they started to rewrite the character to make him a bit more of a sleaze because they got Steve Buscemi for it.
Michael Bay told Collider that his casting director found Michael Clark Duncan at a gym and then proceeds to get sentimental about how much Clark improved as an actor while working on the film. He said, what I loved about Michael Clark Duncan was the charm and just being real. He was a lovable guy. I like working with real people and turning them into actors. But he had this voice and was like a bad B or C actor. He's talking about filming Armageddon. It was first take, second take, and I'm like, oh my God, we're in trouble. I'm like, Mike, I want you to just be you. Pretend it's just you talking. He became the most studied actor in terms of he came literally the furthest because he watched Bruce. He watched everyone. Everyone sort of took him under his wing. Then the next movie he did, Green Mile, he was up for an Oscar. And then in a great bit of oral history editing, a few graphs later, Michael Clark Duncan says to GQ about Michael Bay, he's like one of those chihuahuas that's always barking.
I think Michael Bay's memories of this have been colored by the fact that Michael Clark Duncan died in 2012, and he's got a little rose-colored glasses, a gimlet-eyed. Is that the expression?
Yes.
Because the story I heard was that Michael Bay was threatening to replace Michael Clark Duncan because he was really having a lot of problems with his performance early on, and they pulled him aside and said, you know, we're going to have to replace you if you can't match that energy that you had in the audition. And so they basically just scared him into getting it right.
And then one of my last favorite quotes from that GQ thing, Billy Bob Thornton. I was sitting at the table read through with Owen Wilson and Buscemi, and we were all sitting there kind of nervously. And Steve looks at me and goes, what the f*** are we doing here?
Yeah, later when asked why he did this film, Steve Buscemi replied, I wanted a bigger house. Well, speaking of money and lots of it, Armageddon, not cheap to make. Michael Bay told GQ, on Armageddon, each day was a big, expensive day. We're talking $250,000 a day, and it was a 127-day shoot.
Oh, I was just saying, between that and all the stuff that they were working around, like at NASA, and I guess if you want to do it on a technicality in terms of like the equipment that they were shooting around, this might be the most expensive movie ever made.
I was able to track down, and I think I put it in here. Yes. The cast and crew worked around $19 billion worth of equipment.
So yeah. Easily. Like far and away the most expensive movie if we're counting that as a technicality. Wild.
The film's director of photography, John Schwartzman, told Live Design Online in 1998 that, quote, we used to say the only easy day on Armageddon was yesterday. Ben Affleck told Entertainment Weekly around the same time, we could have made like, I think 400 Chasing Amy's for what we made Armageddon for. And it's something that he mocks on the film's commentary track. He points out a shot and says, "This is where you just have a random helicopter in the background for no real reason, just because you're a big movie and you're expensive and you can. You have no idea how much of a headache having a helicopter in the background causes us. Safety this and money that. Only so many hours they can fly. They're on walkies, winds blasting everywhere." Ben Affleck hated this. I love how much Ben Affleck hated this.
Yeah, it's kind of adorable, honestly. But my God, did they spend money on this movie? They shot over 1 million feet of film, and Kodak sent them a gift basket with 6 bottles of Corbel champagne.
6 bottles, not 6 cases?
Yeah. Various other line items on the budget, in addition to Ben Affleck's $20,000 teeth. Another $20,000 for Frankie the dog that attacks Godzilla toys. He belonged to Brendan Kelly, an actor who'd been in The Rock. No idea if it was his particular set of skills that cost so much, but he was so good at it, they had to hide all the toys from him on set before they started filming. Otherwise, he would just go to town on them. The spacesuits, which on the DVD commentary Bay calls the biggest nightmare of the entire shoots, cost a collective $1.5 million. They were designed in France by someone who just worked with Luc Besson on Fifth Element, and Bay did not enjoy the experience. He is still apoplectic about it on the commentary track. But the guy who designed them, Chris Hillman, came out of it great. He made props and costumes for not only this, but stuff like Stargate and Ad Astra, among many others. And NASA later actually hired him to help redesign a spacesuit for smaller torsos, as well as a helmet adapter. So, yeah. That's great. Good for Chris.
But Michael Bay didn't give him an easy time. He was mad because he went to check in on the costumes just 3 weeks before shooting began, and he said the suits looked like, quote, an Adidas jogging suit on a rack. His breaking point came when he found someone spray painting a generic glove from a garden store and sewing rubber onto the knuckles to make it look a little more official.
Spacey.
Yeah, but I did watch one of the making of featurettes, and Ben Affleck says something about how like they were supposedly one of the first, if not the first, production to actually get proper NASA spacesuits in addition to like, because there are some scenes when they're wearing ones that look like the ones that you see like normal astronauts wear.
I think he's talking about the landing suits that he had to have designed. Yeah, because they have the orange ones. Yeah, we'll talk in a second about this, the access that they had for this film, which is just bananas. The Armadillo vehicle was built specifically for the film as, perhaps predictably, NASA does not actually have a giant tank with Gatling guns on it. That cost $1 million. Good bargain, though. Bay says in the commentary that it never once broke down, and they took it past 3,000 miles without getting the oil changed.
3,000 miles?
It's a Chevy. It has a Chevy 350. I guess driving it around the Badlands had a Chevy 357 engine inside, apparently, and the only person they let drive it was Affleck, which is hilarious to me. The miniature for it alone that Bay keeps in his office cost $150,000. And while we're on the topic of the Armadillo, Mattel had a toy line that they had already planned attached to Armageddon, and they told Bay during production that toy trucks with guns on them sell more because of America. And that is why there is a giant Gatling gun on a space rover. That Gatling gun, incidentally, or the Gatling guns, I don't know if they got multiple ones or if they just moved it from truck to truck, but that was an actual gun from World War II, and it was accompanied by its own full-time police officer to guard it wherever it went. So these are just all items on the guns handler was an item on the line budget.
The guns PA.
Yeah. Can we get someone out to the guns trailer? The gun won't leave its trailer. An oil driller contacted by Mel Magazine to fact-check the film did say that the gun was absurd. But he added, there is a time when you might need a gun during drilling. That's when you're working in northern Canada, when there are bears. Those guys, that's a great feature that Mel did. They fact-checked Armageddon with a gang of oil drillers. And then they said much of the movie, unsurprisingly, is horse, particularly Willis chasing Affleck around with a shotgun on an oil rig. But they do agree with the aspect that oil rig workers are a little rough around the edges, generally. One of the guys is quoted as saying, nowadays with drug testing and laws, it's a little bit harder. But back in the day, you wouldn't go to work unless you were high.
Do they also fact check the space stuff too, or has that already been done by like?
No. The Mel thing was just for the oil rig drillers. The space stuff we'll get to. The bomb that they take on the mission costs $75,000 to design and construct.
That sounds low, considering everything else.
It actually does, yeah. The film's lighting cost was over $1 million, and this was partially because they moved the entire lighting rig to not just Kennedy Space Center, but also the Johnson Space Center in Houston and the oil rig off the Gulf of Mexico where they shot. Yeah, there's the interview with the cinematographer that we quoted earlier is great, but he talks about the lighting for this was so essential. It's part of why the film looks the way it does, that they just whole hog moved their entire lighting rig around to wherever they shot at. Maybe the most expensive part of this was that the main drill site was shot at Stage 2 in Disney, which is larger than a football field and is one of the largest sound stages in Hollywood. But Michael Bay said it wasn't big enough, so they dug the floor down another 40 feet, bringing the entire height of the set to 90 feet at a cost of $2 million. The destruction of Shanghai was originally intended to be shot using miniatures, and actually rather artily for a Michael Bay film, was storyboarded as just being seen through the eyes of a father and a son on a fishing boat. What ended up happening was that they rented the largest soundstage in Hollywood, which belonged to Sony, Stage 30. They built a 90-foot pier and filled the indoor lake for this, and then they blew it all up. I was not able to find a cost attached to the hat. I assumed it was prohibitive. Oh, Lord.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Funny enough, one through item in Michael Bay's career is that despite being seemingly very unpleasant, he has this ability to just charm the pants off people. The oil rig scenes were filmed on an actual working $400 million drilling rig, and Michael Bay claims on the commentary that the reason that they were allowed to film there was because he told them the movie was about oil drillers saving the world, which makes sense. Lighting technician Andy Ryan told in that Live Design Online article that they trucked all of their gear from LA to Galveston, Texas, put it on a barge, and then boated it 180 miles to the oil rig. Our guys used the crane on the oil rig to lift the containers off and line them up. The riggers rigged the rig for us, so to speak. We took a 2-hour helicopter ride to get out there, and within 2 hours we were shooting. Piece of cake. Another amazing Michael Bay quote from the Collider Q&A is about securing a B-2 stealth bomber for Armageddon. On that day on the shoot, they had this line of death where they had 2 military people with M16s. Bruce and the actors are there. They have a sign that says, "You cross this line, lethal force will be used." By lunchtime, I was sitting in that motherfucker. You just gotta be good with the gift of gab.
And yeah, as I said earlier, as a result of this, the cast and crew worked around $19 billion worth of equipment.
It's funny, for someone who is so linked with this American jingoism, rah-rah military science junk stuff in all of his movies, Michael Bay is a weird dick about the actual aesthetics of space exploration. Great quote from the commentary. "I was very unimpressed when I went to NASA." He also described meeting with people who had stayed in the Mir space station, although they were not allowed to call that space station in the film Mir. But he said that it is filled with junk, mold is growing on the walls, and it smells like leaky sewage.
I think it wasn't that they weren't allowed to call it that. I think it was that they didn't want to, because
in case something happened. Yeah.
You know, it was kind of a space jalopy that they were worried it was going to like crash or disintegrate before the film was released, and then they would have this awful joke in the movie.
So the mission control that is in NASA it's just a company that sells herbal products and supplements in Houston. He says the old mission control is the most unsexy thing you've ever seen. If you saw the real NASA, you wouldn't trust it as far as you could throw it. What a way with words.
Michael Bay has a cameo as a scientist at NASA HQ, or at least his NASA HQ. And this goes back to his earliest entertainment ambitions. He wanted to be an actor years before he perfected the art of blowing stuff up on screen. He had started an amateur production of Pirates of Penzance, and as told to GQ, his own mother remembered the performance by saying, "I never laughed so hard in my life."
He also wanted to be a magician. I found an interview
that
where
makes so much sense.
he talks about doing close quarters magic, like sleight of hand stuff. Despite this, his contempt, his seething contempt, perhaps just under his hatred of Ben Affleck's teeth, was his distaste for NASA, the aesthetics of NASA. But my God, they got so much access to stuff for this. And the director of photography, John Schwartzman, told American Cinematographer that he chalked all of this up to Jerry Bruckheimer's cozy relationship with the Air Force, thanks to Top Gun. You may remember from our Top Gun episode that you got a fast plane. You may remember from our Top Gun episode that that movie drove Air Force applications that year. So the Air Force had a cozy relationship with Jerry Bruckheimer, and that apparently extended to NASA. Schwartzman said, when we were making Armageddon, Mimi later was making Deep Impact. We were literally making it at the same time, two movies about asteroids, but they did not have the access that we had. I have to believe that was Jerry's relationship with the government and the military. We had nothing but green lights everywhere we went. It was incredible. I spent a week living on an offshore oil rig for that opening sequence in the movie. The whole crew was flown out to an oil rig. There's not an insurance company or lawyer in the world that would let that happen nowadays. He also tells another thing that would absolutely not happen nowadays, particularly after 9/11, and then also particularly after January 6th. We did things like go to Washington, D.C. on a Sunday with a crew of 5 people on dolly tracks and cameras in a van. We literally bribed the Capitol Police with hats from The Rock that Michael signed to let us lay track inside the Capitol grounds to get shot of the Capitol building.
That's a pretty chintzy bribe. Have the hat signed by like Sean Connery or Nick Cage or something, but I want a hat signed by Michael Bay.
I would. If any friend of the pod wants to send me a Rock hat signed by, it'd be better if it was a hat of The Rock from his WWF days signed by Michael Bay. That's a bit of high concept merch I can get behind.
Director of photography John Schwartzman continued, we shot in what's called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, where the astronauts trained for missions in the world's largest swimming pool. They actually allowed Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis to put on real spacesuits with real astronauts and go into the tank. Willis and Affleck were the first 2 non-astronauts to don spacesuits and perform tasks underwater, accompanied by 5 trained spacemen. And other than the pool, the craziest bit of access that the production had was not only that they were allowed to shoot on a space shuttle and shoot on the gantry where the space shuttles take off, but NASA also let them film a space shuttle launch at Cape Canaveral. And Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis, when they were filming on the gantry, both tried to press their luck with NASA security and step into the space shuttle before NASA techs immediately warned them off. Director of photography John Schwartzman said, it was very complicated. We had to place the cameras before they start to fuel the main rocket. That's usually 48 hours before. We had to deal with getting the NASA computers to turn our cameras on and off. There's a 2-mile fenced-off area. Once they start to fuel the rocket, you can't go in. I imagine for security purposes, like that scene in Contact.
Yeah, they talk about Bay predictably does have a bit of a hard-on for the level of control that NASA has over this. He says, like, if someone drops a pen under the space shuttle before it launches, they have to scrap the entire thing and start all over again, which is something that he surely envies.
So they had to get everything right long before the launch. The director of photography said, once they start to fuel the rocket, you can't go in. You can't change the camera exposure. You're done. You just cross your fingers and hope you did it right. But he added that NASA was very impressed with one aspect of their production. At the time, NASA had been shooting launches with 16mm film, and so when they saw the 35mm Panavision cameras, they just completely lost their minds. And NASA also liked working with rigging gaffer Jeff Soderbergh so much that they kept him on as a consultant at the agency to work with other film productions who wanted to shoot at NASA facilities. And yeah, it's really crazy how much NASA big-upped Michael Bay. The Kennedy Space Center built a movie theater from the ground up to house the premiere of the film in 1998. But despite the close contact with NASA, Armageddon is woefully unrealistic. It's long been an urban legend that NASA actually shows this movie to its trainees and makes them spot all 168 inaccuracies just to test them. But this apparently is just a rumor that likely started in the feedback section of a 2007 edition of the New Scientist magazine, which reads, "Why does NASA show the movie Armageddon as part of its management training programs? In reality, the screenings are just a game for NASA space geeks. Who can find the highest number of impossible things in the movie? The record," feedback is told, "stands at 168. So that bit of truth has been repeated and distorted in a classic case of internet telephone. But the reality is we have no idea if this has actually become a hallowed tradition in NASA training.
It'd be funny if it was.
Yeah, I like that.
Meanwhile, in 2008, a PhD student from Australia won an international prize for a paper she wrote outlining her plan to prevent an asteroid from colliding with the Earth. This was reported in a couple different UK papers. The Space Generation Advisory Council's Move an Asteroid 2008 competition, good lord, was based on Apophis, which is a minor planet expected to pass close to Earth in 2029. Mary DeSouza from the University of Queensland's School of Engineering proposed covering the minor planet in a mylar sheet and using solar radiation to push it off its path. This is, as a few outlets have pointed out, alarmingly close to the plan of action proposed by scientists in Armageddon. We want to land a craft, deploy solar sails. You'll have a great big canopy. Solar winds will be caught by these mylar sails. And Billy Bob Thornton's character replies, "Come on, guys, we've got to come up with something realistic here." It would take an entire podcast to point out what's wrong with the film, specifically, but we could just start with, broadly, the entire premise. The rock is just too damn big, Scottish astrophysicist Dr. Alastair Bruce told iNews in 2017. That's why it's fun to talk about, because it's such a Hollywood thing. They went big, and then they went way too big. The Chelyabinsk asteroid was about 60 feet across. That's the one that exploded above Russia a couple years ago, he continued. I think they say it's once every few decades that the Earth will be hit by something that big. By way of a for instance, he says the largest rock that ever hit the Earth was the one that killed the dinosaurs at 6 miles wide. The one in the film is described as the size of Texas, considerably larger than 6 miles.
According to a making of featurette hosted by Leonard Nimoy, so I trust it, asteroids that would cause a crater that would, say, wipe out Manhattan come every 50,000 years, which that's pretty frequent.
So at that size, it is insane to think that the bomb they used would have done anything. And in fact, 4 physics students came at this from a mathematical angle in 2011, and they determined that the film's bomb would have needed to be roughly 1 billion times stronger than the largest nuke ever detonated on Earth, the Soviet Union's Big Ivan. Was Big Boris taken?
Yeah. But Michael Bay was not bothered by this. He's quoted as saying, "Now, I know there's no fire in space, but it's a movie, and most people don't know that." So, no sound either in space.
His contempt for everyone and everything except for himself and his movies is incredible.
And fire.
And there is one bit of NASA-related procedure that the film did get right. Steve Buscemi's character Rockhound goes a little batty on the way up, and his crewmates tie him up with duct tape. Incredibly, it came out 10 years later that this is an actual NASA procedure. The issue came up in the press in 2011 when an astronaut named Lisa Nowak, who's part of the Discovery's crew in 2006, drove from Houston to Orlando to kidnap a woman who, along with Nowak, was part of, I am not making this up, an astronaut love triangle.
Yeah, she drove all night wearing diapers. Ben Folds referenced it in a song.
Which song?
Called Cologne, off of Way to Normal in 2008.
Well, Nowak was arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping, burglary with assault, and battery. And as part of the press coverage, the Associated Press asked NASA what would happen if an astronaut similarly lost it in space. And NASA sent them a copy of their policy, which the AP paraphrased as, "The astronaut's crewmates should bind his wrists and ankles with duct tape, tie him down with a bungee cord,
Hog tie him,
and inject him with tranquilizers if necessary."
I can't believe they let that out. I can't believe they let that out.
Well, Popular Science took a slightly deeper dive into the details, noting that the flight surgeon, who is part of mission control on Earth, should be notified before the tranquilizers, Valium, are given, but still after the duct tape and bungee cords have been applied.
The order of operations is
Yes, exactly.
duct tape, bungee cord, alert flight doctor.
And then shoot him up with Valium. And Bay and company might have been vindicated last September when it was reported that NASA was embarking on a mission suspiciously similar to the plot of the film. The agency dubbed the experiment the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART for short. Robert Braun, head of the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory's Space Exploration Center, told CNN, "For the first time ever, we will measurably change the orbit of a celestial body in the universe." They did this by sending a small unmanned spacecraft and ramming it into the rock, which was a 525-foot wide asteroid named Dimorphos, at 13,421 miles per hour. The craft was 100 times smaller than the asteroid, so it wasn't quite as dramatic as the film, but NASA was only seeking to change the asteroid's speed as it orbited a much larger asteroid by around 1%. Nancy Chabot, planetary scientist and DART coordination lead, told CNN, "Sometimes we describe it as running a golf cart into a great pyramid, or something like that. It's really about asteroid deflection, not disruption."
Yeah, I think overall Deep Impact is credited with having more scientific accuracy.
A movie neither of us have seen or know
Yes.
anything about, so joke's on them.
Good on them.
According to Bruckheimer and Bay, and they've said this in separate interviews, they've related this anecdote, Michael Bay called up Jerry Bruckheimer one day and said, "Jerry, hey," everything he says to Jerry Bruckheimer
"Hey, Jerry!"
can sound like a Seinfeld quote. "Jerry, hey, I just read Godzilla was competing with us. I said, Jerry, Godzilla, they have a whole album. We don't have shit." And there was this long pause, like, "Let me call you back." 3 days later, we had Aerosmith sitting in his edit room. Songwriter extraordinaire Diane Warren, who's written 9 number ones and is 1 Tony short of an EGOT, was known to Bruckheimer because she had written How Do I Live for Con Air, an incredible and perfect film.
No idea that was for that.
Great song. How do I live? Also a staple of slow dances of my youth. So that song, Warren actually offered it to Leanne Rimes, who was a teenager at the time, but Bruckheimer and his team thought Rimes was too young, and they had Trisha Yearwood record her version for the film. In an incredible bit of passive aggression, country passive aggression, Rimes recorded her own version, and both of them came out on the same day. Yearwood's peaked at 23, Leanne Rimes went to number 2.
Yeah, that's the one I know. Diane Warren told ABC that she came up with the title I Don't Want to Miss a Thing long before she wrote the music. It was actually while watching a 1997 Barbara Walters interview with James Rowland and Barbra Streisand. It was an interview he gave about how he misses her when she sleeps, you know? Like, he can't wait to see her. And I wrote down the title. I didn't write the song, but I just thought, I don't want to miss a thing. That's a pretty cool title, you know? She later told Rolling Stone, "I was shown the end of the movie, so I went back and wrote the song, and never in a million years thought Aerosmith would do it. I kind of thought a female vocalist would end up doing it." And Warren credited Disney music executive Kathy Nelson with first suggesting Aerosmith as the right vehicle for Don't Want to Miss a Thing, supposedly because of the band's string of recent-ish 90s hits like Crazy and Janie's Got a Gun. The fact that Steven Tyler's daughter is the star of the movie, that had to have been a bigger role than I feel like people are making it out to be.
Well, I can't remember where I put this in, but I have read that U2 was originally floated to do this song, which is probably the only thing worse that I can imagine.
Aerosmith, I mean, especially because I'm from Boston, I shouldn't say this, but Aerosmith are one of my least favorite classic rock bands.
Awful band.
Yeah.
Terrible. And what
Sweet Emotion's okay, though. That song kind of goes.
because it has harmonies. That's why you like it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And a good bass part.
Yeah. Their bass parts are like shockingly underrated.
Yeah.
Back in the Saddle. Although that's a 6. That's a Fender 6 string. The Fender 6.
I don't even know the name of the bassist for Aerosmith. Isn't that bad?
Brad Whitford. Or is that the rhythm guitarist?
Rhythm guitarist. Tom Hamilton?
Tom Hamilton.
Yeah, Tom Hamilton.
God, I hate this band. Warren wasn't involved in the song's production at all, she told Shortlist.com. And so she was bowled over when she heard the finished version. The only thing I'd heard was teaching the song to Stephen at the Sunset Marquee. At the villa, there's a piano there where he was staying, and I was just sitting at the piano hearing him sing that. I mean, I still get chills when I think of it because it was so amazing to hear the song come alive like that. And then when I heard the record, it was like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever heard. That is the best thing I've ever heard of any of my songs in my life. Diane Warren is hilarious. Her interviews are amazing, but she is wrong. The band was in the middle of yet another career resurgence. This band has had more second chances at life than Motley Crue or Robert Downey Jr.
Or O.J. Simpson.
Hey-o. Yeah. The band's drummer, Joey Kramer, who's written a few songs for them and is credited with coming up with their name, and is a Trump guy. I think that's why they fired him at one point, didn't they? There was like a big kerfluffle with them recently.
Oh, I don't remember that.
For a band that's considered like this huge classic rock juggernaut, they are messy bitches. Like, they remember when they split up and there was the Joe Perry project, and then I think they fired Joey Kramer recently.
Joe Perry's still playing like casinos around New England.
Good for him. He's a good guitarist.
Yeah. My girlfriend went to high school with Steven Tyler's daughter, and they had like a talent show night or whatever. And they did Great Gig in the Sky, and she came out and did the Claire.
Oh, she did that part? Yeah.
Yeah, she did like the vocal part.
That's crazy.
And apparently like whipped.
Yeah. So she's better than her dad. He has the most annoying voice in the world. Sorry. Joey Kramer told Louder Sound in 2021, I kind of knew it was a hit, but I didn't really like the song. I didn't think that the song was us. When I first heard it, it was just a demo with piano and singing. It was kind of difficult to imagine what kind of touch Aerosmith could put on it and make it our own. Aerosmith guitarist Joe Perry wrote in his 2014 memoir, Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith, maybe it didn't have the masculine edge of our other ballads, but it was a beautiful song.
I do love that song. I'm sorry, I don't care what you say. Also, their first U.S. #1. Baby. I can't do it like you.
Garbage. Terrible song. It's so leaden. It's so thumping and overwrought, and his voice.
Because I can find the beat when I have to dance to it. That's why I like it.
That man should not be singing ballads. I'm sorry. He does not have what you would describe as a sensitive voice.
I like when he starts going into like the high notes. It almost sounds like an electric guitar to me.
I mean, the best thing they ever did was Dream On, and that's the best thing he ever did.
I hate that song.
Really?
Yeah, I hate it.
Wow.
I hate the stupid harpsichord intro. I hate the fake Robert Plant chorus. I hate that song so much.
And yet you like, oh boy.
Because I have bad taste in music.
No, it's because you like treacle. That's
I
why.
do.
Both musical and literal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. As part of the process to convince the band, they brought them down to view rough footage from the film. Steven Tyler later told MTV News that my daughter, at the end, I don't want to give it away, but she starts crying and she yells, "Daddy." The tears started running down and I said, I'll do the song. Fair.
I mean, maybe hearing his daughter reference dads, was kind of
the deciding factor. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know about Liv and Steven Tyler's kind of difficult early years. Liv spent most of her early life believing that Todd Rundgren was her dad. Who among us? Liv's mother, model B.B. Buell, named her Liv Rundgren. That's the name on her birth certificate, which was signed by Todd Rundgren. She'd been living with Todd for many years, I think from like 1970 to 77 or something, most of the 70s. But so at some point during their time together, she had a brief, she got with Steven Tyler for what's been described as a brief relationship, which I can't tell if that's a euphemism or not. But the official story was that Steven was deep in his drug addiction, and Buell told young Liv that Todd was her dad just to sort of protect her. But I can't tell if this was something that Todd Rundgren was in on. I do know he signed the birth certificate. I don't know if she just had an affair and didn't tell him, pretended the baby was his or not. But in any event, I guess Liv reportedly figured out her true paternity around age 10 when she met Steven Tyler's daughter, Mia, and noticed that they looked basically like twins. And if you Google them, they do. And she asked her mom about it, and her mom told her the truth about who her real father was. And Liv changed her name in 1991 at the age of 14. And that's so when she kind of, officially came out as Steven Tyler's daughter. She told Wonderland magazine, Todd Rundgren was my father. Todd basically decided when I was born that I needed a father, so he signed my birth certificate. He knew that there was a chance I might not be his, but there's a lot of puzzling ellipses in here. I sort of stopped calling him dad, but when he, he's the most, I'm so grateful to him. I have so much love for him. When he holds me, it feels like daddy, and he's very protective and strong. That's sweet, and something I never would have imagined about Todd Rundgren, the I don't want to work, I just want to bang on my drum all day guy. And to People magazine, Liv described Todd Rundgren as, quote, her spiritual father. But to me, this whole backstory adds an extra poignancy to this song, which is maybe one of the reasons why I like it. As in, an absentee father who got his life back on track, wanting to be there with his daughter and not want to miss anything, I think that there's something sweet about that there. Plus, it works so perfectly in the movie. Liv's character has kind of a tricky relationship with her dad, and then her real-life dad is singing to her in the soundtrack. It's great. Don't you get all the drama behind it? Does that add anything to you?
No.
Okay.
it's the canceled, but the Kevin Spacey inside the actor's studio when he's doing the Pacino impression.
Oh, funny.
No.
Okay.
No. Doesn't do anything for me.
That's so weird. Did I send that? Because I was just watching.
No, it's one of my favorites before
it's one of my
pre-canceling. I've watched it a bunch.
He's a stalker.
Well, I'd love to tell you that, but I don't work on Tuesdays.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's, I think the John Gielgud one. Just run through the whole thing right now. Oh, well, studied for years and years, so good.
Walking.
Yeah, but everyone has a walk-in. It's really it's the Golden Pond one.
Or
Yeah,
am I just thinking of
that's the I don't work on Tuesdays one.
Oh wait, who am I thinking of? Oh, I'm thinking of Jack Lemmon.
Yeah, and he does Eastwood too, where he's like, I'd say get it done by 6 so you can get out early and hit the links.
I love that.
Aerosmith fans are correct in their hatred for this song because apparently all of the other treacly crap that they had pop songwriters come in and write with them, like Desmond Child, that's all just fine. But this one is a bridge too far. But Diane Warren is amazing. She's a real eccentric. Someone has, in an interview, talked about her carrying her like pet bird around with her and talking to it like out on the street. She told Stereogum in an interview, I wrote I Don't Want to Miss a Thing for Armageddon, and then years later the director of The Sweetest Thing wanted to see me because they'd spent all this money shooting a scene where they used I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. He was scared because it was a scene where Selma Blair was giving a blowjob to somebody, and the guy had a ring on, and it gets caught in her throat. So she needed a song to sing, and they used I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. It ended up being a big sing-along. I guess they thought I wasn't going to say it was okay. Of course I think it's okay. I wish I was in the group singing along to it. One last quote from her. She gave it a short list. It's funny because even though I wrote I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, I can't relate to it. It's always funny to me because I wouldn't want someone to listen to me breathe all night. I could stay awake just to hear you breathing. I don't want to do that. If someone listens to me breathe all night, I'm like, get the out of here. What's wrong with you? Oh, what a treasure. Oh, and for some reason on this song's Wikipedia page, it mentions that heavyweight boxer Tyson Fury has sung it live after beating opponents on 2 separate occasions in 2015 and 2019, one of whom was former world heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko, who is now, I believe, fighting in Ukraine. So there's that.
Is there any lyrical reference that would make it make sense for a post-fight victory song?
I
don't think so.
Maybe he just really likes the song. Tyson Fury, I don't
want
to miss a thing. Yeah, there's footage of it online.
That's okay.
There was a minor kerfuffle around this movie in 2013 when a journalist from the Miami Herald made it seem like Bay was apologizing for Armageddon. Saying, I will apologize for Armageddon. Tremendous. I didn't write that to be so funny, but it is. I will apologize for Armageddon because we had to do the whole movie in 16 weeks. It was a massive undertaking. That was not fair to the movie. I would redo the entire third act if I could, but the studio literally took the movie away from us. It was terrible. My visual effects supervisor had a nervous breakdown, so I had to be in charge of that. I called James Cameron and asked, what do you do when you're doing all the effects yourself? But the movie did fine. There's two things about that I didn't write in here that I want to relate. One is that journalist actually sent the tape around of the interview because they were so annoyed that they made it seem like they were being misquoted. And two, James Cameron's advice to Michael Bay was, have two meetings. One from 12 to 1 p.m. and the other from 7 to 8 p.m. I guess so you could plan the day and then have a debriefing on what went wrong. But Bay was sufficiently incensed by this to take to his own website's blog and call this article out, writing, I'm not in the slightest going to apologize for the third movie in my career. What I clearly said to the reporter is, I wish I had more time to edit the film, specifically the third act. He asked me, in effect, what you would change if you could in your movies, if you could go back. God, he talks weird. He asked me, in effect, what would you change if you could in your movies, if you could go back? I said, I wish we had a few more weeks in the edit room on Armageddon. Yes, I'm proud of the movie. Enough said. Bay would later elaborate in an interview to Moviephone that his visual effects guy had, quote, something that happened in his family, which I guess is marginally more sensitive to this man than saying nervous breakdown. But the studio moved the release date up, and so Bay continued, I'm a young filmmaker, this is my third movie, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got this massive movie on my hand. I had so little time to actually cut the movie. We were literally in and out with 16 weeks, which is an extraordinarily short time to cut and finish a movie of that size. So if I could, I would have wanted to go back to that 70, 80-minute mark where I thought the effects just sucked. But that's life.
But he needn't have worried, at least from a financial perspective. Armageddon was released on July 1st, 1998, and took first place at the box office with an opening weekend gross of $36 million, and it hit $54.2 million in its first 5 days, ultimately grossing $553.7 million worldwide. It was the highest grossing film of 1998 worldwide and the second highest grossing film of that year in the United States, finishing just behind Saving Private Ryan. Interesting quote from Michael Bay, courtesy of his grandfather, who once told him, you can make money if you sell stuff to Middle America.
I have to wonder if Bay doing Pearl Harbor after this was his attempt at a you to Saving Private Ryan for beating Armageddon. It kind of has to be, right?
Good thought, yes. So it did well at the box office, but critics, however, that was a whole different story. Roger Ebert famously hated it, writing, quote, the movie is an assault on the eyes, the ears, the brain, common sense, and the human desire to be entertained.
That's an all-timer.
Yes. He especially hated the film's fast-paced and quick-style editing. The average cut apparently in this movie lasts just 1.5 seconds. And
That's insane.
Yeah, right? That's really nuts. And this led Roger Ebert to call Armageddon, quote, the first 150-minute trailer. He would go on to name it the worst film of 1998, with its biggest competition being Spice World, and included it on his all-time most hated films list. Michael Bay also remembers in the commentary that he watched the film at a screening with LA Times critic Kenneth Turan in the audience, who famously also hated Titanic. Michael Bay said he looked like he had a scowl on his face, and I'm telling you, the audience cheered 12 times. I don't think he liked that.
He counted. Of course he counted. Ultimately, the film was nominated for Best Original Song, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects at the Oscars, and it lost. Meanwhile, at the Razzies that year, it was nominated for Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actor, Worst Supporting Actress, Worst Screenplay, Worst Screen Couple, and Worst Original Song. It won Worst Actor for Bruce Willis, who had a banner year at the Razzies. He was also nominated for Mercury Rising and The Siege.
And as we touched on at the top of the episode, despite only having a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, Armageddon was included in the Criterion Collection's list of DVD releases. For the essay paired with the release, which is something that Criterion always does, the company chose film scholar Janine Bassinger, who taught Michael Bay in college, presumably to explain herself. The DVD commentary opens with Michael Bay himself saying, "Why is there a Criterion edition of Armageddon?"
Armageddon, despite this checkered legacy, was a launch pad for basically everyone involved. As we mentioned, Willis's next picture as part of his deal with Disney was The Sixth Sense, easily one of his best roles of all time. Michael Clark Duncan went on to do The Green Mile and pick up an Oscar nomination. Liv Tyler went on to Lord of the Rings. Owen Wilson went on to Shanghai Noon, The World Tenenbaums, and Zoolander. Billy Bob Thornton went on to Monsters Ball and Bad Santa. Buscemi then did Monsters, Inc. and Ghost World. So just all stuff that these people are forever remembered by happened in the couple of years after Armageddon. Affleck did Shakespeare in Love, and then stuff like Dogma, Boiler Room, and Reindeer Games. But then pretty much right after that, he enters his Bennifer phase, and we get Geely and the rest.
Jersey Girl?
What's that?
Jersey Girl?
Oh, Jersey Girl. Yeah. And then also Pearl Harbor, which is Bay's next film and a pretty big flop. And then Bay didn't really recover from this for like 10 years. He went from the sort of flop of Pearl Harbor to the flop of The Island. And then in Transformers in 2007, that's when he really, comes back roaring. I got a little highfalutin with this outro. Thinking about this movie and in its place in the zeitgeist in the pre-9/11 American empire, the waning days of the Clintonian American empire. I'm reminded of that Hunter S. Thompson line about looking out with the right kind of eyes and seeing where the last wave crested and broke. This film and Independence Day are really kind of some of the last movies of that spirit of like big rah American jingoist exceptionalism, U.S. blowing stuff up real good to save the day. And Bay, for one, seems to agree. Last year, he was talking to Entertainment Weekly, and he said, "A lot of European press have started to look at my movies, and they say, 'You're a very patriotic director. And do you feel that the American dream is disappearing?' And I'm like, 'That's a very astute observation. And yes, I do.'" He continued, "I think we were all crying on Armageddon when they literally shut down prepping the shuttle for an hour so we could go onto the gantry. And it's like, this is just awesome that we could do this because it's just the brain power and the total American can-do spirit. And I think we've lost that can-do spirit." So while Bay's brand of big and loud might be a dizzying and dated reminder of the pre-9/11 American maximalism, we'll always have that on-screen asteroid the size of Texas. Folks, this has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.